Thank you very much. I just want to follow up on my colleague comments from New Orleans, Mr. Richmond. And to say, to me, this is simply a continuation of what we heard. Mexicans are murderers, rapists, drug dealers. There might be a few good ones, but for the most part, that's who they are. And to say that that's kind of my life experience in the United States of America. I'm a little older than a lot of members of this committee. So I was born in 1953 when separate but equal was the law of the land. Now, I lived in the North, not in the South. So they didn't have a sign that said, Negroes drink here and whites drink there. But I knew which swimming pools not to go to. I knew which schools I was not going to be enrolled in the city of Chicago. I knew what parks not to play baseball in. And so it's, sorry, but it's part of a continuation of using race and at the same time criminalization of a community to combine to create fear and to create a politicization which you benefit from. That's not new in America. I've been living that experience all of my life, and I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, which, by the way, Martin Luther King said when he came to my city in 1967, he said he never saw such hate in people's eyes anywhere in the South when he came to visit my city. So segregation and the use of it and the use of races is a pretty old. So now we're dealing with children. Children under the age of 14. I don't know. I have a grandson that's 14. He's a child. He thinks about soccer. He thinks about playing his Xbox. He thinks about what 14-year-old kids think about. The latest hip-hop song that he, compares to some reggaeton music because he combines them all together because he's 14 years old. I was into the Beatles, right, when I was 14 years old. That's what kids are about. And you're asking kids to make decisions about life and death circumstances and take away protections about kids at that very tender age? But they're kids from Central America. They're from Honduras. And remember that when you say in America, Mexicans are murderers, rapists, and drug dealers, here's what America understands. Latinos are murderers, drug dealers. Because I got to tell you, you got to be quite an expert to be able to tell the difference between a Dominican, a Puerto Rican, a Colombian, a Mexican, a Salvadorian, or by the same rate, an African American that comes from Jamaica or Africa or from the South. I wouldn't venture to tell the difference if I just saw them, where their country of origin, or someone that's white, whether they came from, Ukraine or Poland or Ireland. I'd probably have a hard time. So I understand. So people understand that. And that, sadly, is part of what we're confronting here today. So we're going to be able to take away the protections for children that come from these countries fleeing not just abject poverty, because that would be one thing. Abject poverty would be one thing. Because you see, they could get a job, and they could maybe not have everything nutritional that they need. But that's not really what the case is. It's a case of whether they're going to live or die, not whether they're going to have a job or not there that pays better here. And that's really what we're going to take the protection away from those kids. Because remember, the majority of refugees are what? Children. I know that you tend to look at the news and they'll talk to you, well, those jihadists are coming, those hardline, they're coming. And they'll show you the M15 and the gangbangers are coming. But really, they're kids. They're kids coming, fleeing. And that's what we're having here today. So I understand this conversation in that context, that we're going to continue to have this conversation in that context, because unfortunately, that's the context in which I've learned. My friend, Mr. Jeffrey, he's from New York. So he knows a little bit about the history of the Puerto Rican community. My mom and dad came to this country because they were poor, because they had a bad education. And in 1952, they came to New York, Mr. Jeffrey's city. And they didn't have a banner that says, oh, what a good idea. that all you hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans just showed up. And they came as citizens of the United States. You know what they said about my mom and dad? They were murderers. They were criminals. That they wanted to be on welfare. Oh, and that they were bringing tropical diseases from the island of Puerto Rico. And all the elected officials in New York tried to stop people like my mom and dad from coming. Now, they were citizens. What do they have in common with the people today? The color of their skin and the language that they speak and the origin of the United States and of the world that they come from. And I think that's unfortunate that history has to continue to repeat itself. But maybe there wasn't anybody to stand up for my mom and dad. But I'm going to stand up for people who are just like my mom and dad today.
Mr. Chairman.
Where's the gentleman?